started applying and I thought I was doing all the right things. I would apply, I would find people on LinkedIn, I would message them, I'd email people. I thought I was doing all the right things. But when no one was responding and then rejection started coming in, I was like, this is not real.
Welcome to the Tech Unlock podcast, where we demystify emerging technologies and give you the keys to unlock your successful tech career. I'm your host, Grace MacJones. Let's unlock the future together. Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of the Tech Unlock podcast. Today, I have a very special guest, and I'm excited for this conversation because I feel like it's so relevant right now. I have my sister with me on the pod, a fellow Gen Zer who is here to debate me. JK, we're not debating anything, but we had a conversation recently, and I felt like let's put it on the pod because I do feel like a lot has changed within tech and corporate America, and vision that I kind of have about Gen Z is different from the actual Gen Z in the workforce. And so we're going to talk about that today, why Gen Z can't really find jobs within corporate America, and then also like why employers are firing Gen Z folks and how you can find a job if you are looking for a job right now in corporate America or in technology. So welcome to the show, Sarah. I'm excited to have
Thank
you.
you. Thank you so much. Yeah, like Grace said, my name's Sarah. I am a student studying design in Texas right now, and I'm really excited about this conversation because Gen Z, we need all the help we can get.
I love that you're open to it because some people feel like, oh, I can figure it out myself. There was an article recently that talked about how 1 in 6 companies don't want to hire Gen Z, according to a survey, because Gen Z folks are entitled, easily offended, and unable to handle feedback. What say you, Sarah? Is this a factual reporting or is it a lie?
The shots have been fired. I feel like, I mean, I definitely feel targeted, but I can't say that they're wrong. I think a lot of people coming out of college, and kind of talked about this earlier, coming out of the pandemic too, kind of don't have these interpersonal and soft skills that a lot of the workforce needs, especially in corporate America. And so, offensive and entitlement, like, that is some things I definitely see in some of my peers, and honestly, some of the things I have worked on, especially in my line of work. But I think also it's a generalization because I don't think we're all like that, to be honest. I feel like it depends on your background, your experience, your connections, all of
That
those
makes,
things.
I agree with you. That makes a lot of sense. I feel like we had this happen in our generation when millennials were entering the workforce and like, wow, like all they want to do is play and have free pizza and and it showed, Google with the nice offices. So I feel like in every
Bean
generation there's like
bags.
always all this think pieces
Yeah.
about how either lazy or different the next generation is. And it's fun, is like it should be different. We shouldn't all be the same because we're going through a
Mm,
different lived experience.
right.
But to your point, the overgeneralization is exhausting, but there is some truth to it because it's easy right now to go on social media and you see someone's like, oh, like I work remotely and I go to the pool and I go whatever. Because like people see people like Alex Earl, like obviously no shade to her doing her thing, but she's not in corporate America, right? Like she has her own brand. And so people like want that same freedom of like, okay, I want to do whatever I want whenever I want. But it's like corporate America is corporate America. Like you can just come in and do whatever you want and just feel like it's going to be fine. But in the same vein, I think Gen Z are like not putting up with all the crap in terms of like, okay, I don't want to be overworked for like not
Mm,
good enough pay. I'm not buying all the BS about,
yeah.
the company can afford certain things, and so I think there's some truth and them being like, okay, I don't want to put up with this, right? And so, but it's very naive to say I don't want to deal with the consequences of
Mm,
not putting up with the big man. You know what I mean? There is going to be consequences, and so if you don't want to deal with those things, then you
right.
have to work for
Yeah.
yourself, or do something different. And so with that being said, how do you feel right now with the job climate? Because you are currently in college looking for an internship, or you were looking for an internship and looking for jobs, and it's been hard. And you're right now interning in New York. Tell me about your life, girl. How has it been?
It's been a roller coaster, to be honest. I think no one really prepares you as much as there are resources and people and things that can kind of like help you figure it out. No one really prepares you for the journey, but I'd say my experience has definitely been interesting. I'm really grateful because I've had a lot of resources from my school because it's a state school and it's a flagship. There's a lot of resources that we kind of get from that. And then also just being able to have connections from professors who have been in the city before, or just people who know the area and know different companies in the area that they were connected to and connecting me. Very, very fortunate for that. But for looking for internships in New York City specifically, it's very
Hmm.
competitive, as is the whole job market in America. Like, it's just literally insane. There are people who have insane credentials, like master students who are just vying for like
What?
unpaid
Wow.
internships. It's horrible. Yeah, it's horrible. And so I think coming in, because I've been fortunate to have experience in Texas with design work, I've done freelance, I've worked with a lot of different organizations, nonprofit and for profit. I was like, oh, my resume is looking good. Like, I'm chilling. Like,
Right.
give me my money. Like, I'm right. But I started applying and I thought I was doing all the right things. I would apply, I would find people on LinkedIn, I would message them, I'd email people. I thought I was doing all the right things. But when no one was responding and then rejection started coming in, I was like, this is not real. Like, this is not okay. And I really was like questioning, like, dang, like, are my skills good enough? First of all, am I learning all the things I need to be learning in order to be successful, even post grad? Because thankfully, I'm not post grad yet, so I don't have as much stress as like looking for a full time gig right now. But that kind of like lingering fear was still in the back of my head. Thankfully, I did find something. It wasn't the perfect something, but it was something. And some things I learned from that experience is definitely, as cliche as it sounds, like it really isn't what you know to you know. I think both are important for sure, but people are the ones that get you in the door, not necessarily your work. And so I think just keeping that in mind. And I'm excited to talk
Yeah,
more
that
about that
sounds like
too.
you're going through it. Like going through the job search process in New York where like every single person is talented. Like they're bringing their A game. Like you can't slack. Like and you mentioning like master students like applying
Yeah,
for
at all.
internships or unpaid. Like it's the same thing right now in tech job market where like people are literally taking entry level, software engineering jobs when they've had like 10, 20 years in big tech companies, but they need to feed their kids or they need to pay rent. And so there's a lot of
Yeah,
desperation and there's a lot of
yeah.
competition right now within the job market, even with internships, right? And so I think that's great. I think location is one of those things that people don't think about. Yes, it's great to have the freedom to live wherever, but honestly, being in the right place at the right time can literally change your life. And so I'm glad that you took that leap of faith and like, you know what, I'm gonna be in New York. It's a struggle bus, but hey, it's gonna be worth it, right? Like you're putting the work, and so it's funny because that kind of like nullifies kind of what we started talking about where it's like all Gen Zers are, it's like no, that's not true. There's some of you guys who are like putting in the work, but then again, it might be because you're African and you're Nigerian, and so you have to not learn how to work super hard, and just
The
be on
background.
top of it, and
Yeah.
so I think that the job search process is different for everyone, but there are a few things that people can do to help them stand out.
I mean, there are a myriad of things you can do to stand out. One thing I've heard, I've had the opportunity to do some tours of companies here in the city, and one thing recruiters and people in these companies keep saying is finding ways to differentiate yourself. So one is, as like simple as it sounds, it's not easy. Knowing who you are and what you bring to the table. I think knowing what sets you apart is so important, especially in my field of design work. There are so many trendy things that are going on. Everyone kind of knows how to use
Canva.
Photoshop, Adobe, AI. Like, there's so many, yeah, Canva. Like, there's so many, and I'm grateful that it's becoming accessible to everyone. Um, but everyone kind of has the similar skills. So one thing that can set you apart, not just in the design world, but in general, is having a niche set of skills that you can add to the regular general skills that is required for the job you're looking for. I would say specifically in the design world, also on your portfolio, having work that you want to get hired for. So not just having school projects you've done or just random things that you're interested, even though showing your personality is very, very important. but also if you want to go specifically into illustration and visual and graphics, have that type of work on your portfolio. And also showing kind of the journey and your creative process throughout your portfolio is really important as well. What else? I think, and I want to go into this really connections. Like
Mm.
it's such a different world. I think people in school don't really prepare you for, unless you're like a business student and like you kind of like grew up in that world. But people don't really talk about like how to gain connections and actually how to network. So I kind of want to spin it on you a little bit, Grace, about like how, as a millennial, you've been in the industry for a minute, you've been in the job market, you've had success in your work. How would you say, what are some best practices for networking in the early
That is
stages
a
of your
question I
career?
feel like a lot of people think they understand, but they don't really go in depth. And so I want to preface my response saying that things have changed when I was looking for a job versus now. There are some things that still hold true, but you've highlighted some of those things about obviously it's who you know and that can help you and kind of niching down. But for right now, I'm going to give advice about like literally right now, we're what in 2024, like how do you network right? Because I do feel like networking is dead. Like it's overrated. Like people are burnt out from like, oh, can I pick your brain or can we have a coffee chat? Like, bro, no, I'm broke. I don't have time. I'm tired. Don't come for me. Like, and so no, people are not trying to be mean, but it's like it's a lot
Literally.
happening in the world right now, and so just sliding into people's DMs
Yeah.
in on LinkedIn or whatever it is with just a generic like, can I pick your brain or can I, coffee? Like I don't want to discourage anyone, but it's played out and it's overdone. So that's not the best form of networking. Yes, shoot your shot. Like I don't want
Mm,
you guys coming from in the comments like shoot your shot. But usually, if you're shooting your shot, there's like 500 people also shooting their shot at that person if they're a hiring manager or a recruiter. So just remember that. I would say right now, the number one thing that probably will help you to network in a way that's authentic is to be a very interesting person doing something interesting. And now that might sound very basic and like so vague, but like when you are reaching out to someone, think about it. Why are you reaching out to them? There's something that you find interesting, or maybe they're in a position that they can help you. And so if you're a student, right, or someone who is, you just graduated, what about your life is interesting enough for someone to want to talk to you? And a lot of people feel like, okay, I'm just a student, I have nothing to offer, like I'm just, I need a job, I need to pay these bills. But that's kind of like self-focus on me, I. Everyone has a need. We understand that like everyone is looking to, you know, have a job and live a comfortable life. But is there something that you're passionate about? Is there something that you are volunteering for? Is there something that helps you stand out? And so for me, I would say like I was always interested in like doing the traditional networking, going to events and doing that stuff, which helped me. And that's how I learned about my job at Microsoft and blah 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 blah. But now that technology has made everything very accessible, if you're really not building anything interesting or creating anything interesting or even being concerned about things that are interesting, then you kind of like die out. Like there's no way for you to stand out, like you said, Sarah. So I would say as an individual, think about, okay, what am I doing right now that is of interest to somebody else? Don't make it self-centered. And so, yes,
mm,
you might have a degree or you're pursuing a degree,
yeah.
but that is not very interesting to a lot of people. It's like, yeah, you and like 10,000 people. And so if you think about it, like, okay, maybe you're interested in, let's say you mentioned like design. There's a bunch of different types of design. There is, product design, there's UX UI, there's system design, there's the whole world like multimedia design. There's so much. And so you find a field and like, okay, this is what I
Yeah.
find interesting. Okay, how are you displaying that you're interested in that? And so this is where having a presence on social
Mm,
media or having a platform
yeah.
can really help you stand out. If you're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm shy. Oh my gosh, I'm
Mm,
an introvert. I don't like talking to people." That's an excuse, but that's not good enough, right? Closed mouths don't get fed, like I've said several times.
yeah.
Like, and so if you're like, okay, I'm not, the person that's going to go on TikTok or Instagram, go live, then you need to think, okay, what is authentic to me, right? And so start writing a newsletter, right? Or start a podcast that's maybe audio first and then turns into video. But now I have to figure out like, okay, how can I be visible in a way that attracts the right people to me? And so number one, be someone that's interesting, literally, to have a conversation. Because if someone's slid into my DMs, I'm like, okay, I'm looking for a job at your company, here's my resume. I get those almost all the time. And before, like I would say like 6 years ago, I used to be able to have the time, the capacity to go through that. But now, let's be for real. Like, I really do not have the time or the capacity to look through your resume, look up who you are. And not that I'm a big deal on anything, I'm really not. It's just like I really do not have the time. And so, but if you message me or even other people and say, like, hey, I'm a student, I started this nonprofit focused on helping, people with, certain disabilities use technology to, I don't know, be more successful in their education. Like, so, like I'm like, oh, that's actually interesting. Like, I might not have the tools to maybe help you get the job,
Yeah.
but you being that specific, I can look within my network. I'm like, okay, who's working with accessibility, and I can point you to them and say, like, hey, I love what
Mm,
you're doing. It's great. I don't have the skills or the background to help you, but talk to this person, talk to that person. So you kind of have to do the work for the other person, right? Like, if you're
yeah.
looking for an opportunity, be like, here's my portfolio, or like, here's what I'm
True.
interested in. When you are specific, it shortens the length of time, usually of that person responding to you or how they can help you. But when you're abroad, they have to look up who you are, research,
Mm,
and honestly, if they don't know you, they're
yeah.
not really
Like,
required to pour in that time to helping
yeah,
you.
it's not
So that's a
happening.
long answer for like one point, but I think it's necessary
Yeah.
that you're like, okay, what am I doing that's interesting? Like, what is it that other people can get invested in? And so you can't be selfish, right? Like, that's another thing. You can't be like, oh, I'm already in college. Oh, I'm already
Yeah.
working 2, 3 jobs. Like, yeah. And like, it sounds really
And
messed up, but like that's the world we live in now. You can't be selfish.
yeah.
But if there are things that you're passionate about or things that you build are interesting, it's inviting a conversation. So think about, how am I inviting a conversation by this message I'm sending? Is it about, oh, look at me and help me, or like, hey, this is what I'm doing. Like, would you be interested in collaborating? Or do you know someone who will be interested in the skill sets that I have that I'm willing to offer? And it's not fair. Like, obviously back in the day, you have a degree and that's all it took to, get a job, but things have changed. So that's one specific tip that I would give.
Yeah, I know, I love that. And I really want to piggyback off what you said about not being selfish and making sure those connections you're making are actually having fruitful conversations. To just going deeper into that, how would you say is the best way to turn those connections into opportunities? Because I feel like some people, either it's like solely
Mm.
transactional, can you help me with this? And it's like, bro, I don't even know you. And then, or it's like, oh, we're having great conversations, kind of like a mentorship thing, or even peer to peer, but it's not really going anywhere. How would you
I love that you
combat
brought up
those
being
things?
transactional. Like, everyone can spot if you're just reaching out just to get something out of it without building some type of rapport or relationship. So I'll give you an example. Like, when I first started out, the podcast, I would say like, "Hey, I work here," and yes, granted, I had a privilege of having now working in a big tech company, but I never used that as a way to like, "Hey, I work at this company, so come to my podcast," because my podcast has nothing to do with my company. You know what I mean? And so I would say, "Hey, like, I love the videos you put out about, helping, women, or helping people understand the depths of emerging technology or something specific. Like, be personable, like, if someone, and that has worked on me too. People reach out, I'm like, hey, I listened to this episode of your podcast on XYZ. Do you have advice about this? I'm like, okay. Like, even if it's, yeah, like, even if, like, everyone
Mm,
loves to be
they
complimented,
listen.
everyone wants to be acknowledged. And
Yeah.
so it doesn't mean that you just boost people's ego and be like, okay, let me just try and, like, because like I said, people can sense that. But if you have someone that you want to
Yeah.
talk to, like, let's say it's maybe a professor or a director, and they are already creating some type of content. They have research papers, they have a portfolio, they have a vlog. Start engaging with them at that
Mm,
form, right? And then if you do reach out, be
mm,
transparent, be authentic. Just be like, hey, like, I saw a recent video that you did, and I'm curious of like what the process looked like, because I would want to either pursue a master's degree in a specific topic, or I want to actually have this type of job in the future. And obviously, we're saying all this stuff, and it's not a guarantee that people will respond to you, but it takes away the selfishness of like, oh, help me. It's like, no, like,
Right.
I know who you are and what you do, and I've acknowledged it. And sometimes they might not
Yeah.
respond right away. That's another thing. If you're reaching out to people who are, let's say, vertical, right? Like that's another thing. If they're vertical, if you're hired, then you have more career experience or, in better positions in their career, chances are they really don't have time. Like that's another thing. Or they're, swamped a lot of responsibility. But I would say I was from experience, like before I would go to like certain conferences or whatever, like I would reach out to two or three people that I was really interested in actually meeting, right? And say like, hey, I love what you do. And I've already interacted with their stuff online. So whether that's, YouTube, Instagram, whatever it is. And I would reach out, a month or so before the event. And most times people respond. And sometimes I would follow up, 2 or 3 weeks later. And it's like, hey, just pushing this back up in your inbox or, just want to double check. And some people are like, oh my gosh, thank you. Like I wanted to respond, but then I went on vacation or I wanted to respond, but so you have to give people grace. Like also, like it's not like people are being rude or mean, but once you come from in that perspective of like, okay, obviously, yes, I do have a need, and that need could be I want to learn something or I'm curious about this person's career. But you do the work of actually getting to know what's already out there. Like, okay, this person, went to the same school that I did, and they had a, uh, organization that helped whatever. And you notice I keep saying helped, helped, helped. Like, if you're not giving anything, why do you expect someone to give something to you? Like, you need to be out there trying to invest in other people as well. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, I have nothing to give. Like I have, not, I'm still learning. I'm still growing. It's like the little that you know and sharing that with someone else can go a long way, right? Sometimes you're like, oh no, I need to be, a VP
Oh
or I need to be
yeah.
someone like externally very important. It's like, no, like your lived journey is experience,
Mhm.
right? And so if you went from high school to college,
Right.
bro, that's experience that maybe a high school person needs. Like, how did you make it to college? Like, in that specific college, like, so don't ever minimize, what you
Hmm.
do know from your own lived experience. And so to kind of wrap it up, like, make sure that you are coming in with this approach of like, okay, yeah, like, how can I help this, person, or how can I showcase that I've done my research and my homework to learn about what they do, what I admire about them, and what I really hope to learn. Because there's sometimes people can respond like, "Hey, I'd love to mentor you, but not right now. Maybe in the future." But you need to be specific. You need to know what they do. Like engage with their content. Like it doesn't matter who you are. If you're the richest person in the world, whatever. Like people engaging with content or giving compliments, like that's always a good way. Yeah, to be like, okay, I see you acknowledge the hard work that you're putting into it. And like I said, don't be fake. People can tell if you just go like all their posts and then message them. Like that is suspicious. I'm like, blocked. JK, just kidding, guys. But yeah.
Oh yeah, that is really helpful. I think being able to discern where you're at in your journey, and ask for help with the right people and ask in the right way. I think that's super, super helpful. And I just want to wrap it up with one last question. Because okay, now first we're asking people for help. We got the opportunity from asking people for help. Now we're at the opportunity and we don't want to screw it up because these articles are saying they'd be firing us. So what are some ways? Obviously, we know job security is not really a thing right now or has ever been, to be honest. But what are some ways that you would kind of give advice to your Gen Z counterparts about like starting this journey in corporate America? Some things you haven't realized early on in your journey, but that you know now.
That's a very good question. I think going back to something that you said is like you have to know yourself. It sounds very, very like easy and vague, but I would say a lot of Gen Zers right now have identity crisis. They're trying to figure out who am I, in college, who am I, with the friends or without friends, who am I, like, so there's a lot of identity crisis right now, and usually it's attached to external factors, which is valid, obviously, and so when there's no that
Right.
validation of an internship with a big name company or an affiliation with a organization or fraternity, whatever it is, or, you know, lack of money to do the like solve basic situations for yourself. Like, so it's just kind of like, oh my gosh, like who am I? Like, what am I doing wrong? Like, why? And the internet is very bad. Like, the internet can make you feel like your life is in the
Mm,
toilet, like it's going rough. So taking time to be like, okay,
yeah.
who am I and what do I want out of this world, and whatever opportunity I'm looking for is necessary. Because fast forward, a lot of people right now who are getting laid off, I would say, because I've had friends and people who have struggled through getting laid off, are like, man, like my job was my identity. Like, I don't know if people will respect me or love me
Right.
if I don't have this title, this name, this, compensation to my name. And so I would say make sure you invest time in knowing who you are, because that can help you vet the opportunities that you get. Because there are people who get to work at, big finance companies or tech companies, and then they lose your soul, right? It's all about the money and they're in golden handcuffs. But if you're like, you know what, I don't mind getting either less pay or moving to a different city because I love what I'm building or creating, you don't have to love your job. I know some people are like, okay, it's just a job. You don't have to, but if you it means not sacrificing your mental health and you having some type of impact that makes you proud of yourself, then that's the goal. That is the goal. So know who you are, define what you call happiness. And I know people say money can buy happiness. It can give you options. Let's be for real. Let's be for real. Um, then that makes the process easier. I know there are, articles about like, okay, 6 ways to do this, 7 ways, but at the core, knowing yourself, having that identity settle in can help a long way. Everything else is going to come into play, because if you're like, okay, I want to be in an environment where I get to work and things are exciting, where I feel valued, where what I'm doing has an impact, then you are able to analyze, what jobs do I apply for. And some people are like, it's not that deep, cool. But for other people, it's like, yeah, no, it is, because I want to start building a career and I don't want to,
Yeah.
you know, my
Right.
mental health to decline because of like I'm trying to make ends meet and like my manager hates
Right.
me and whatever, which is the reality for some people. And knowing that in corporate America, you don't always have your way, but knowing that, okay, I can detach from this job and
Yeah.
it's not my whole life, I can be fine. And so
Yeah.
yes, I can give you skills,
Mm.
tips about communication
Yeah.
skills and like, how to, manage up and all this stuff, which, please listen to the rest of the podcast because there's, tips about those things. But for me, I think that's the biggest lesson that I've learned. Like, who am I outside of my job? How am I building my community and people that value me outside of like what I do? Right. Um, and it's the hardest thing to do because it takes a lot of deep work.
Yeah. It takes a lot of reflection, and I think you have to really sit with yourself and really like recognize what it is that you want and what you're looking for. I think for me and for a lot of people, it's the gap of
Mm,
where I'm at right now and where I want to be. And that gap seems like it's a chasm for a lot of people. For me, it seems that way a lot of the times. But I think, yeah, like you said, doing the deep work. And I want to add two things that you've told me in the past too, which is like one, aligning, making sure with companies and you're interviewing, making sure you're interviewing the company just as much as they're interviewing you, and making sure you align
mm.
yourself with their company values or their company values align with what you value as an individual. And secondly, and I've been seeing this a lot more recently too, but I think going back, if I had to start college again, and I'm curious to see if you agree with this, but choosing your lifestyle before choosing your job, because when you come out with a degree and you're like, wait, I thought I would be making this much, but I'm actually only making this much because the job market has evolved, the economy is different, all of these things are happening. Again, more things that I feel like the education system doesn't really teach us a lot. So I those two things I feel like have been really valuable to me, on top of everything you just said. Um, but yeah, make sure you guys listen to some of the other podcasts because Grace has talked about like networking more so and other tips and breaking into.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your experience. 'Cause I do feel like coming from a Gen Z makes more sense than me telling people what to do as a millennial, And so Being in your 20s, things will be different in your career versus your 30s. Like your priorities are different, and maybe we can do a different episode about like 20s versus 30s, like what should you focus on within your career. But spot on about like, okay, interview the company, because some jobs are not worth your life. Like we don't have time, but I like literally it's not worth it. Like it's not the end of the world, and there's just so much people are going through right now, and I just feel like, okay, like just do the hard work of sitting back and really just reflect and write things down. And I know it's easier said than done when you're trying to pay your bills, like you're trying to get whatever it is. So whatever it is, yes, in the interim, yes, like do what it needs to, like you need to do. Like I know for you, obviously you were looking for a paid internship. I was like, yeah, get your money, get what you deserve. And then you're like, girl, there ain't nothing out here, you know. And so
Right.
you have to do an unpaid, like, but it's New York, and but that has opened doors for you to be in
Yeah.
certain rooms with VPs, CVPs, like high level folks that now
Right.
and it's only for a short amount of time. So there is times
Right.
where you have to make certain sacrifices, but you have to be the right sacrifices. It looks like an investment to your
Yeah.
future and not a detriment to your
Mm,
current situation, right? And so
yeah.
trying to navigate which is which takes
That's
time,
good.
and that's why it's required to sit down and do the deep work of like, okay, is this worth it? Like what kind of investment is this, and so I love that we're able to cover a lot of topics with Gen Z work ethics, how to find a job, how to network. And let us know if you want a part two, because we can continue having this conversation. But thank you so much, Sarah, for coming on the pod and sharing your experience. If folks want to connect with you, what's the best place they can connect with you?
Yes, I'm on LinkedIn, and that is just at Sarah MacJones. My full name, also on Instagram at sarah.mcjones.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining. And if you love this episode, definitely rate it. And we will catch you on the next week of the Tech and Look podcast. Thank you. Bye.
Hey!